I was 19 when I found out my college fund was gone. And not, oops, we accidentally dipped into it for a car repair gone. I mean vanished, erased, siphoned off over 2 years without a single word, until the truth hit me like a brick wall the week before tuition was due. My name's Brandon. I'm a quiet guy, the type who keeps his head down, does what he's supposed to, and doesn't cause problems. I've always been like that, even as a kid. Straight A's, part-time jobs since I was 15, never missed a curfew. I didn't drink, I didn't party, I didn't date around. I had one goal: get into a good college, become an engineer, and build a stable life. Not flashy, just safe. Something I could be proud of. I grew up in suburban Oregon, in a modest house with my parents and my older brother, Josh. He's 24 now, and for as long as I can remember, Josh was the golden child. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on. When he won a middle school science fair, you'd think he'd invented the cure for cancer. When I won mine, a nod, maybe, if I was lucky, but it wasn't always resentment. When I was younger, I admired Josh. He was charismatic, charming, and had that type of confidence that made everyone want to follow him. Teachers loved him. Girls flocked to him. He wasn't dumb, but he wasn't a genius either. He just knew how to sell himself. And I guess that's all our parents ever saw. By the time I was finishing my senior year of high school, Josh was 2 years into his startup journey. That's what he called it, anyway. After dropping out of college in his sophomore year, something that was somehow spun into a heroic act of independence, he'd started a company with a couple of his buddies. I never really understood what they did. Something with crypto, or digital art, or AI trading bots. It changed every time he talked about it. I didn't ask too many questions. Honestly, I was focused on my own life. I'd just been accepted into the engineering program at a university I dreamed of attending for years. Not Ivy League or anything, but prestigious enough that it felt like I'd made it. My dad shook my hand when I told him. My mom smiled and said, "That's great, honey." Then Josh walked in and started talking about a new investor he was courting, and just like that, all eyes were back on him. Still, I wasn't bitter. I figured I'd prove myself in time. The way I saw it, if I worked hard and kept my grades up, everything else would follow. And to be fair, my parents had been saving for my education for years. They opened a 529 plan when I was 6. It wasn't loaded, but it was enough to cover most of my tuition if I went in-state, which I did. I even picked the cheaper dorm option, out of respect. That summer before college was a blur of odd jobs and prep. I worked as a lifeguard during the day and delivered pizzas at night. I bought used textbooks and scavenged Reddit for tips on surviving engineering courses. My parents were distant, distracted. They kept talking in hushed tones after dinner. My mom was always checking the mail with this anxious look. My dad started snapping more. Nothing abusive, just tense. But I chalked it up to stress. Josh was still living at home, bouncing between investor pitches and late-night team meetings in the garage. Then came the financial aid meeting. It was supposed to be a formality. I just needed my parents to verify some income details so I could finalize the tuition payment. I handed my mom the forms while she was making coffee. She stared at them a bit too long. "Is something wrong?" I asked. She gave this tiny, almost imperceptible smile. "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." But I did worry, and I started noticing things. The family car disappeared from the driveway for a few days, then returned with different tires. My dad's watch, his prize tag Heuer, was gone. My mom sold some of her jewelry. Josh started going on long drives and coming back empty-handed, eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept. Then, one evening, I overheard a conversation that froze me. I was walking past the living room to grab a snack when I heard my dad's voice, low and desperate. "You said the seed round would cover everything. We weren't supposed to dip that deep into the 529. Josh replied, cool as ever. "It's just a temporary setback. Crypto's down, but we're pivoting. New platform. Real-time AI valuation on NFT liquidity. It's the future, Dad." My father sighed. "Brandon's starting school next week." There was silence. Then Josh said, "He's smart. He'll get loans." I just stood there, heart thudding. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I didn't even confront them that night. I just went back to my room, sat on my bed, and stared at the wall for hours. The next day, I asked my mom directly, "Is my college fund still intact?" She paused. "Brandon, things have been difficult lately." That was all the answer I needed. When I pressed, she started crying. Told me they didn't mean to use it all. That Josh's startup had run into some problems, and they thought they could replace the money before anyone noticed. That they still believed in him. That we're a family, and family supports each other. I remember staring at her, stunned, as she wiped her tears and tried to hug me. And all I could think was, I did everything right. And it still wasn't enough. The tuition deadline was 5 days away. I called the university. They confirmed the 529 account linked to my student profile had been emptied 6 months ago. Not reduced, zeroed out. I wasn't eligible for much in the way of federal aid, because my parents' income technically looked solid on paper. I had no cosigner for private loans. And even if I did, I couldn't get approved fast enough. I skipped dinner that night, locked myself in my room, and just stared at my acceptance letter. The one I'd framed. The one that used to make me proud. I didn't sleep. I started calculating. If I took a year off and worked 2 jobs, maybe I could afford to reapply. Or maybe I could live in my car. Or maybe none of this would ever work, because I was already being set up to fail. And the worst part? Josh didn't even apologize. When I confronted him the next morning, he just shrugged. It's not like I wanted to take it. But we were in a bind. You'll be fine, man. College is a scam anyway. He actually had the nerve to say that. As if stealing my shot at a future was some kind of favor. I was shaking, fists clenched, voice trembling. You stole my life. He raised an eyebrow, like I was being dramatic. Relax. You're 19. You'll bounce back. That was the moment something inside me changed. Like a door slammed shut. I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done being the quiet one. The responsible one. The invisible background character in the saga of Josh the Genius. They'd taken my future, but I still had something they didn't know I had. Leverage. And I was going to use it. That week was the longest of my life. I walked around the house like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my mind kept replaying the same reel. My mom's teary face, my dad's slumped shoulders, Josh's smug indifference. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my framed acceptance letter. I'd stopped looking at it. It was now face down on my desk. It didn't take long for the tension in the house to reach a boil. The air felt thick, like everything unsaid was pressing in on the walls, waiting to explode. I didn't talk much. I ate in silence, slept in silence, moved in silence. I knew that if I opened my mouth, the dam would break. But Josh? He was louder than ever. 3 days after I found out about the fund, he came home waving a crumpled flyer in the air like it was a winning lottery ticket. Check this out, he grinned. New co-working space just opened up downtown. Super vibey. Exposed brick, kombucha bar, all that. Dad looked up from his newspaper. How much? Only $650 a month if I sign now. Found a guy on Reddit who'll split it with me. Mom chimed in. That's a steal. You'll be more productive there, honey. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were nodding along like this was a completely reasonable expense, like Josh hadn't just bankrupted my future. I set my fork down and stared across the table. Where's that money coming from? I asked, quiet but sharp. Josh blinked at me. What? You said it costs $650 a month. Are you pulling that from thin air, or is this another withdrawal from the Bank of Brandon? My mom flinched. Brandon? No, I snapped. I want to know. Because last I checked, we're broke. But somehow we've got cash for exposed brick and kombucha. Josh rolled his eyes. It's called investing in the business. It's called mooching off the only savings I had. My voice cracked. I stood up, hands clenched. You took everything. And now you want more. Brandon, my dad said firmly, sit down. No. I said again, louder this time. You told me my future mattered. You made me turn down out-of-state scholarships because we had a solid plan. You looked me in the eye and promised I'd graduate debt-free. And now? Now I'm supposed to just roll over and clap while Josh plays startup CEO? Watch your tone, Dad growled. This isn't helping anyone. I laughed. Actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just disbelief. I am helping. I've been helping since I was 15. Working shifts after school while Josh was out networking. I didn't ask for much. Just a shot at a normal life. Josh leaned back in his chair, unfazed. Look, man, I get it. You're upset. But this is temporary. When things pick up, I'll make it right. With what? Monopoly money. I barked. You think I care about your fake app and your fake team and your fake meetings? You can't even explain what your company does without making up buzzwords. That's enough. Dad slammed his fist on the table. I froze. Everyone did. The room went dead silent except for the clatter of his spoon falling to the floor. I won't have this toxic energy in my house, he said, voice low. You will not tear down your brother just because you're going through a rough patch. I stared at him. Tear him down. He didn't blink. That was the moment I realized. He meant it. They all did. In their eyes, I was the problem. The ungrateful one. The bitter sibling. I left the table without another word. That night, I packed a bag and drove to a friend's house. Slept on his couch for 2 nights, just to get space. When I came back, the house was calm again. Like nothing had happened. That was when the real betrayal came. A letter was waiting for me on the kitchen counter. A typed note from my dad. No greeting. No warmth. Just a cold, clipped message. Brandon, we've taken a hard look at our finances and determined that it is no longer sustainable for you to live here rent-free. Effective immediately, you will need to contribute $400 per month toward household expenses. If you are unable to do so, we will need to reevaluate your living arrangement. Dad, I read it 3 times, hoping I was misinterpreting it. They drained my college fund, and now they wanted rent. I stormed into the living room, note in hand. My mom was folding laundry. Josh was sprawled on the couch playing a mobile game. You're charging me rent now? I asked, voice shaking. My mom looked up, surprised. Brandon, you've been staying here for free. You're an adult now. It's time you started pulling your weight. I couldn't speak for a second. You stole my future, and now you want me to pay you for it. Josh didn't even look up. Pretty standard, bro, welcome to adulthood. I felt like I was going to explode. You're living here rent-free. Josh shrugged. I'm building something. That's different. That's delusional. Mom's face hardened. Don't talk to your brother like that. I'm not living here, I said flatly. Not like this. I grabbed the note, crumpled it, and threw it in the trash. Then I went upstairs and locked the door. I didn't sleep that night either. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what the money meant. They didn't see me. Not really. I was a utility to them. A quiet, convenient backup plan. A fallback they could count on to behave, to absorb the damage, to make sacrifices when Josh's gambles went bust. And Josh, he was the sun in their little universe. Bright, blinding, burning everything in orbit, but always forgiven. Always trusted. The next morning, I woke up to another slap in the face. They'd gone through my room. My desk drawer was open. My bank statements were missing. My laptop had been moved. When I asked my mom about it, she gave me that same wounded expression she always used when she was guilty. I just needed to check something, she said. You've been so secretive lately. I felt physically ill. That was the last straw. I spent the next 3 days acting like nothing had changed. I was polite, distant, but calm. I told them I was considering taking a semester off to regroup. That maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't need to find a job. They ate it up. Meanwhile, I was quietly putting together a plan. A plan they would never see coming. Because they thought I was passive. They thought I was broken. But they forgot something important. I'm not Josh. I don't bluff. I don't posture. I don't pitch dreams and pray for magic. I build things. And I just started building the blueprint for their downfall. But the moment everything truly snapped, the moment that turned me from bitter to furious, was still coming. The night they gathered me in the living room and asked me to drop out completely, to work full-time and help them recover what they'd lost, to help pay off Josh's startup debt. And that conversation, that was when I knew they never planned to fix anything. They were just waiting for me to fix it for them. It happened on a Tuesday night. We were all in the living room. My dad had called it a family meeting, but the moment I walked in and saw Josh lounging on the recliner like he was running a board meeting, I knew something was off. My mom was sitting next to him, hands folded neatly in her lap, like she was preparing for some kind of announcement. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, arms folded. I'd learned to keep my defenses up in that house. Brandon, Dad began, voice unusually soft. We've been doing a lot of thinking. About your future. About the family's future. I didn't respond. We know this year didn't start the way you planned, Mom added, eyes flitting to mine. But sometimes life changes. Dreams evolve. Cut to the chase, I said flatly. Josh smirked. We think it would be smart if you took a break from school. Silence. I blinked. A break. Just for now, Dad said quickly. Until things stabilize. Your tuition is a lot. And right now, we can't keep sinking into debt trying to support something that's not yielding a return yet. Yet, Mom repeated like a nervous echo. I stared at them, trying to understand if this was real. You want me to drop out? I said, not a question. And do what? Josh leaned forward. We talked about it. You could work full-time. Maybe get something in logistics, tech support, retail. Doesn't have to be glamorous. Just enough to help with the family's finances for a year or two. A slow breath escaped me. Let me guess. You keep working on the startup? He grinned. Exactly. Once we secure our Series A round, everything changes. We just need a little more time. And support. The walls felt like they were tilting. My ears were ringing. You already took my college fund, I whispered. You already stole my future. Now you want me to walk away from the only thing I have left, so you can keep playing entrepreneur? Josh's smile faded. It's not playing. You have no product, no revenue, no plan. You've failed 3 launches. Your team quit. You're working out of a garage and calling it a tech hub. That's enough. Dad snapped. I turned to him. No, it's not enough. Not until someone says it out loud. You gambled my education on a fantasy, and now that the fantasy's burning down, you want me to pour water on it while you fan the flames. You're being dramatic, Mom whispered. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, just a cold, quiet void. I'm not dropping out, I said. Dad stiffened. Brandon, I'm not dropping out. And I'm not paying a cent toward his debt. I'm done cleaning up his messes. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't have a plan that night. I just drove. Ended up at a 24-hour diner, sipping burnt coffee at a booth by the window, watching the lights blur outside as my brain tried to process what had just happened. I must have looked rough, because the waitress gave me an extra plate of fries without asking. That was rock bottom. I had no money, no dorm to return to, no backup plan. My savings were gone. My future was hijacked. My parents had basically disowned me without saying the words. And somehow, despite it all, I wasn't even surprised. Just tired. So tired. That night, I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to my friend Noah, a guy I'd met in high school robotics club. We weren't super close, but he'd always been kind, and I remembered he'd moved into a tiny studio a few miles away. When I asked if he knew of anyone looking for a roommate, he didn't hesitate. I've got a futon, he said. It's yours until you figure things out. The second call was to my academic advisor. Hey, Brandon, she said, concerned. I was wondering when you'd check in. I saw the hold on your account. I explained everything. Maybe not everything, but enough. She didn't judge, didn't scold, just listened. When I was done, she sighed. You've always been one of the most driven students I've had, she said. And I'm not going to let you disappear without a fight. That conversation opened a door. It turned out there were emergency grants, small scholarships, department work-study programs. Not enough to cover everything, but enough to scrape by if I kept my expenses low and worked hard. I spent the next week applying to every opportunity one could find. I moved into Noah's tiny studio, living out of a duffel bag. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a hardware store during the day, another doing food delivery at night. I ate ramen and eggs, and whatever Noah didn't mind sharing. I sold old electronics. I even taught high school kids math over Zoom on weekends. It was the hardest I've ever worked. And slowly, painfully slowly, things started to shift. I scraped together enough to re-enroll. I cut my schedule down to part-time, stretching my degree out by a year, but it was better than nothing. My GPA held strong. I started joining online communities for broke students, forums where we shared free resources, textbook hacks, coding tips. One day, while browsing a subreddit for freelance gigs, I stumbled across a post looking for someone to build a prototype for a niche inventory tracking app. Low pay, but real work. I messaged them, took the job. That gig led to another, and another. Soon, I was coding small apps for local businesses, scheduling tools, internal dashboards, data trackers. Nothing flashy, but real, useful, solid. And I realized something. I was good at this. Not just pass the class good. Solve real problems good. While Josh was busy burning money on pitch decks, I was learning to actually build. No investors. No buzzwords. Just results. It felt incredible. Every time I got a new client or solved a tricky bug, it chipped away at the bitterness inside me. I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of me my parents had ignored, but the version I'd always wanted to become. I stopped checking in at home. I'd blocked Josh's number weeks ago. My parents texted a few times, short, empty messages asking if I was doing okay, but never apologizing. I didn't respond. I needed space. And I was finally starting to breathe again. One afternoon, about 6 months after the family meeting, I got an email that stopped me in my tracks. It was from a startup accelerator in Seattle. One of my freelance clients had nominated me. They were impressed by my work. Asked if I wanted to join their cohort. Fully remote, small grant included, plus mentorship. I reread the email 3 times before it sank in. This was it. The rise after the fall. Not flashy, not overnight. Just a quiet, steady climb, earned through sweat and solitude. And I wasn't done yet. Because while I was building my future brick by brick, my parents and Josh, they were still sinking. And they didn't know that I'd been watching. Quietly, carefully, documenting everything. Every text, every email, every bank record I could still access, every screenshot of Josh's fake pitch decks, every whisper of the truth they thought would never catch up to them. They thought I'd moved on, but they had no idea what was coming next. They thought I'd disappeared. And in a way, I had. I was no longer the Brandon they remembered, the polite kid in hand-me-down jeans who never raised his voice and always cleared his plate. That Brandon died the day they asked me to sacrifice my life for Josh's broken startup. But the new Brandon? The one who lived on eggs and freelance gigs, the one who built apps at 3 a.m. while listening to rain on the studio roof? He was sharper, hungrier, focused, and quietly, I was becoming dangerous. Let's rewind a bit. I didn't plan on revenge at first. Honestly, in those early months, all I wanted was to survive, to scrape together tuition, to rebuild some version of my future from the ashes. But something shifted the day I got accepted into the Seattle accelerator. That acceptance wasn't just validation, it was leverage, the kind I'd never had before. And once I tasted that kind of power, it was like a switch flipped. I started remembering things. Little things I'd let slide. Like how Josh used my student ID to apply for a discount at a co-working space. Or how he once asked for my bank login, just to check if the 529 routing number was working. Back then, I hadn't thought twice. Now, it looked a whole lot like identity theft. So I started digging. I spent every spare hour combing through my old accounts, searching emails, checking browser histories, requesting financial reports from my bank. It was tedious, and honestly, some of it made me feel sick. But the deeper I dug, the more I found. They'd really gone all in. Josh had funneled money from my 529 account into a separate business account, technically under his name, but opened using my info as the co-signer, thanks to some forged digital forms and a sympathetic family banker who assumed we were working together. There were at least 3 charges that clearly had nothing to do with business expenses. One for a flight to Vegas, one for a custom gaming PC, and one for a branding consultant who charged $1,200 for a logo that looked like it was made in PowerPoint. The worst part? Some of those charges happened after they told me the account had run dry. I gathered screenshots, requested paper trails, created a separate encrypted folder on a cloud drive, locked behind 2-step authentication and an alias email address that no one knew about. If they ever tried to spin the narrative, I'd be ready. But I wasn't just collecting receipts. I was setting traps. I started laying digital breadcrumbs. Josh had a habit of oversharing online. He used LinkedIn like it was a personal diary, bragging about partnerships that didn't exist, employees who'd long since quit, even a series around that never actually happened. I screenshotted every post, every announcement, every fake milestone. Then I started checking those claims against public records. It wasn't hard. A quick search showed no registered business license in the state. No incorporation documents. Nothing. He wasn't running a company. He was playing dress up with other people's money. Still, I needed more. So I reached out to Kevin. Kevin was one of Josh's former co-founders, a guy who had vanished from the garage office months before everything fell apart. We'd never talked much, but I remembered him being the only one in that house who didn't talk to me like I was furniture. I found his Instagram, saw he was working at a real company now, some fintech firm in Austin, and sent him a short, polite message. To my surprise, he replied the same day. Dude, I've been waiting for someone to ask. What do you want to know? Turns out, Kevin had been burned too. He'd put in 6 months of work, sweat, and late nights only to be pushed out when Josh got spooked that Kevin might want equity. There was no paperwork, no cap table, no contracts, just handshake promises and vague dreams. Kevin still had files though. Emails, Slack logs, screenshots, even a full pitch deck with my name listed as technical advisor, which I had never agreed to. We jumped on a Zoom call, and for 2 hours, he walked me through the entire history of the startup, from inception to implosion. I took notes, asked questions, and let him vent. At the end of the call, I asked if he'd be willing to send me what he had. He didn't even hesitate. "Consider it karma," he said. "Just don't tell Josh I helped you." I didn't. By now, I had enough for a full dossier. Financial mismanagement, potential identity fraud, fraudulent fundraising claims, even intellectual property theft. Turns out one of the prototypes Josh demoed was just a skinned version of an open-source app Kevin had built from scratch. Still, I knew I couldn't go nuclear yet. Revenge isn't just about hitting back. It's about when. So I waited. I kept working, kept growing. My freelance side hustle started to gain real traction. People were recommending me, tagging me in posts, referring me to others. I built a small website, created a brand, cleaned up my GitHub. Then, one night, I got an email from a recruiter at a mid-sized tech company. They'd seen my work through the accelerator. Asked if I'd consider coming on part-time as a junior dev. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Steady paycheck, resume value, experience. I said yes. 3 months later, they offered to bring me on full-time. I said no, because by then, something else had happened. A woman named Eliza, one of my earliest clients, reached out and asked if I'd ever considered building a product with someone instead of for them. She was working on a health data platform. Real data, real partnerships, real funding. She needed a technical co-founder. We had coffee, then Zoom calls, then planning docs. Long story short, we incorporated a company together that summer. And this time, I wasn't the ghost in someone else's garage. I was the architect. Still, I didn't tell anyone at home. Not yet. They hadn't earned that part of me. But they weren't done with their part of the story either. Because one night, out of the blue, I got a call from my mom. I didn't answer. Let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, brittle, like she'd been crying. "Brandon, please call me back. It's about Josh. He's in trouble. Serious trouble. We could really use your help." I sat there, staring at the screen. Then I played the message again. And smiled. Because that was the moment I'd been waiting for. That was the moment the scales finally tipped. The moment they needed me. And I wasn't going to waste it. But before I moved, I needed one last thing. A meeting. Face to face. Not with Josh. Not with my parents. With a family friend. Mr. Langley. He'd been our accountant for years. Quiet, kind, gray-haired. The type of guy who wore suspenders and carried everything in a manila folder. I remembered him coming to the house once a year to go over taxes. He always brought jelly beans. I scheduled a meeting under the pretense of needing advice about self-employment taxes. Halfway through, I shifted the conversation. "Can I ask you something off the record?" Langley raised an eyebrow. Of course. I told him about the 529 withdrawals. About the forged cosigner forms. About my name on a company I didn't belong to. I left out revenge. I framed it as concern, confusion, a need for clarity. Langley went quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Brandon, I probably shouldn't say this, but I never believed you were involved. I suspected something wasn't right when Josh brought those forms in. They looked hasty, but your parents insisted. Said you'd agreed. What could I do?" My stomach twisted. "You could have asked me." He nodded slowly, shame in his eyes. "I know." I let that sit for a beat. Then I asked the real question. If someone wanted to press charges, or at least initiate a civil case, what would that process look like? Langley looked at me differently after that. More careful, more respectful. He didn't answer right away, but he did pull out a new folder and start writing things down. That was when I knew it was almost time. Almost. Because when the house of cards finally came crashing down, I wasn't going to nudge it. I was going to pull the table out from under it. And I wanted them to watch it fall. I didn't call my mom back right away. I listened to her voicemail once, then again, then once more the next morning while sipping cheap diner coffee before my shift. There was no apology in her voice, just panic. That was the first sign things were getting real. The second came 2 days later, when I got a Facebook message from an unknown account. No profile picture, no bio, just one sentence. "Josh is being investigated." I didn't reply, didn't need to. I already knew. See, a few weeks before that call, I'd made one final move. Something quiet, simple, just an email to a state regulatory agency. Then another, this time to a fraud tip line associated with one of Josh's supposed partner banks. Finally, I submitted an anonymous complaint to the Small Business Bureau. I backed up everything. Screenshots, records, messages, dates, photos of forms Josh had forged with my name, some laughably bad, with digital signatures that didn't even match my legal one. I attached it all under a burner Gmail, cleaned the metadata, and sent it off into the world like a signal flare. I didn't expect immediate results. These things take time. But once the first inquiry hit, it was like dominoes falling in slow motion. I didn't see the full fallout until about a week after the voicemail. I was scrolling LinkedIn when I saw it. Josh's profile had been wiped clean. No company, no achievements, just a photo and a generic headline. Tech enthusiast. That was weird. So I checked the business's website. Gone. Social media? Inactive. It was like the company never existed. Like someone had gone through with a sledgehammer and smashed everything into silence. I wasn't surprised when my mom called again. This time I picked up. Brandon. Thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you. What happened? I asked, keeping my voice flat. Her breath hitched. They froze Josh's account. Someone reported him. There was an investigation. Some of the documents he submitted for the grant application didn't match up. And they said your name was listed as an officer. I never agreed to that. I know that now. But, Brandon, they might press charges. He might go to jail. I didn't say anything. She continued, desperate. He's scared. We're all scared. They said there was evidence of identity theft. Fraud. They want to question all of us. Brandon, please, if there's anything you can do. Did you know what he was doing? A long silence. We thought it was just temporary. We thought it would pay off in the end. We didn't think it would get this far. You signed off on it, I said. You let him drain my future. And now that his future's on fire, you want me to come be the hose. No, she gasped. We didn't think you'd really turn your back on us. I smiled, cold and calm. You turned your back on me a long time ago. And then I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. Here's what happened next. The fraud investigation went public about 3 weeks later. Nothing major, just a local news site publishing a short piece about a former startup founder under investigation for financial misconduct. No names at first, but the internet's good at connecting dots. I didn't need to spread it. Josh's old coworkers did that for me. Kevin posted a detailed Medium article outlining the entire fake company timeline. He never mentioned Josh by name, but anyone who'd ever worked in the same circle knew exactly who he meant. Other burned collaborators chimed in with their stories. There were screenshots, photos, emails. Josh's reputation crumbled overnight. Every lie unraveled. Every fake claim got picked apart. And all those pitch decks he posted online for clout, they became exhibits. Then came the legal letters. Josh was issued a cease and desist by one of the companies he'd falsely claimed as a partner. Another firm accused him of scraping their open source code and branding it as his own. There were hints of a civil suit, but I never found out how far it went. Honestly, I didn't care, because by then, the real damage had been done. He couldn't work in tech again. Not under his name. Not in this state. He tried to rebrand. Changed his LinkedIn. Made vague tweets about learning from failure. Started a podcast. Even 3 episodes of him rambling about hustle culture and entrepreneurial adversity. It flopped in a month. As for my parents, they went into damage control mode. They'd already drained their savings. The house was refinanced. The IRS was sniffing around due to Josh's creative bookkeeping, and they were scared. Really scared. At some point, they tried to blame each other. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my dad moved into a motel for a while. My mom tried to pick up a part-time job, but it was too little, too late. They lost the house 6 months later. Foreclosure. I didn't celebrate. I didn't laugh. But I did feel the weight lift from my shoulders. Not because they suffered, but because I didn't have to carry it anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat. Their backup plan. Their invisible second son. I was my own person. Meanwhile, I kept building. The startup with Eliza? It took off. Slowly, then suddenly. We landed a real partnership with a health data firm. Hired a small team. Got real users. Got seed funding. I paid off the little student debt I had left within a year. Moved into my own apartment. Framed my degree when it finally came in the mail. One day, I opened a new bank account and labeled it Brandon's Fund. A private savings account, locked down and secure. Not for tuition. Not for emergencies. Just for me. Because I'd learned something. Trust isn't about blood. It's about respect. And once that's gone, there's no going back. A few months after Josh's downfall, I got one last email from him. No subject line. Just a block of text. I know you had something to do with this. I don't know how, but I know it. You think you're better than me now? You think because you built some rinky-dink little product you're suddenly important? Whatever. You're still the same jealous little brother. Just with a grudge and a keyboard. Hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. Didn't have to. Because by then, I'd already won. Not just the revenge. Not just the fallout. I'd won me back. And the last line of that chapter? Simple. I built something real while they destroyed themselves chasing something fake.